Melanin's role is in fact even being rethought in medicine, that, is it really something that just absorbs sunlight, or does melanin have a role in the immune system in the body? And is it really more of an antimicrobial kind of defense against bacteria? Because melanin is found throughout all the animal and vegetable kingdom. And melanin is the very thing that you have in your hair and in your skin that gives you the color. Whether you're more red, whether you're more brown, whether you're tanned, whether you're not, is because the melanin produced by your skin in the parts of the cell called melanocytes, or the pigment of your skin. And some people who have a condition called vitiligo, where their skin looks blotchy and they have white patches, they don't make this pigment. When you're exposed to ultraviolet radiation, you make more of it. Now, melanin is what gives chaga its dark color. That's what's so rich in this mushroom compared to the other mushrooms. And what they found in Russia, it protects genes and it actually repairs broken DNA. Isn't that wonderful? Something breaks down because you're exposed to chemicals or radiation. Think of the people of Japan right now in 2011 who are suffering from huge amounts of radiation. What could we do to help them repair prevent cancer developing? Well, you need a DNA repairer, and that's what melanin does. Just think what you can tell people who have families over there and so on. So this is a complex molecule. It's found in the brain. It's found in your adrenal glands. It's a powerful free radical scavenger. In other words, it helps the body prevent this oxidation, so it's an antioxidant. And I believe this is what makes chaga, among other things, one of the more special mushrooms that are out there. Now, just look at this. I hope you can read this, that 40% of the dry weight of chaga is made up of these water extractable substances, and more than half, when you dry it, of that extract, which is 25% of the original material, is actually this coloring, this melanin. It's called a chromogenic complex. It's another name for it makes a dark color. It's a dark color complex, and 25% of this mushroom is made up out of this. It's its most distinctive feature. Now, and again, this is in that paper by Shashkina. That's on the website. You can learn about the chemical and medical biological properties of chaga, a review study translated out of Russian from 2006. And this paper basically says, there are these polyphenolic, chromogenic, human-like complexes present in chaga. In other words, it's the dark stuff. The dark stuff, the black, brown stuff in chaga, what makes everything look so dark, which just, put it on your skin and it looks a little darker, but somehow it improves in things, as we'll talk about in a minute. That's what's in chaga. And they studied this, Babetskaya studied this in 2002, studied this melanin complex, and says it protects the genes in your body. Now, I'm going to switch hats for a minute and talk. As some of you know, I'm also an engineer and a biomedical engineer, and I've designed equipment that we took to the top of Mount Everest and did the first scientific studies on top of Mount Everest to find out why people could live up there. A very rough environment because there's no oxygen there to breathe, and with no oxygen, your brain isn't very happy, and neither is all the cells in your body. So up there is less atmosphere, and there's an awful lot of light. And so I got really interested back in the 1980s when we did this kind of work with the University of California in San Diego, where I was doing a postdoctoral fellowship. I got really interested also in light. Now, the visible light in the electromagnetic spectrum is only a small part, and it's the colors from the deep reds to the purples. But it's in this very narrow band. Below that there is infrared or warmth, infrared light or warmth, microwaves that we use for communication nowadays with our cell phones and Wi-Fi and so on. Radio waves are even longer. And then up here are what's ionizing radiation that breaks down things like ultraviolet light, which is faster in frequency, X-rays and gamma rays like we get from atomic reactors and so forth. So light is a very narrow part of the spectrum in what's called nanometers wavelength, 400 to 700 nanometers. Here's another way of seeing it. Here's the electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light that your eyes respond to and your skin responds to is a narrow part of the spectrum, here. Now, when you look at absorption curves in the test tube of melanin, this is what we're talking about. You can see in the blue part of the spectrum over here, the short wavelengths, which is higher energy, melanin has a lot of absorption, and it falls off a little bit, but it's in the same region that our body absorbs also light in forms of hemoglobin when you oxygenate your blood. It's also in that same region. And when you deoxygenate your blood, when the cells take the oxygen up, then you get the bluer blood, which is venous blood. And it's in the same region where melanin absorbs it. Has a very broad absorption of energy. Picture. Okay? It absorbs light and warmth very, very effectively, and it modulates something in the body. And melanin, you can think of, is very analogous to the chlorophyll. That's the green stuff in plants. What makes the plants green? Chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the same molecule as hemoglobin that's in your blood, except hemoglobin has iron in the center and chlorophyll has magnesium in the center. It's like liquid green blood. Okay? Now melanin has the same kind of ring structures and so on, and it makes very complex structures, and not all melanins are the same. As we'll talk about in a minute. In fact, there's somebody even studying that and wondering whether energy is directly absorbed from the melanin in your skin and transformed into energy in your body. Okay? And they even think about could in the future, and they're developing this now, they're taking melanin and making batteries out of them that store energy from the sunlight directly. It might in fact become a future source of how we're going to generate energy. Now, let's get back with that little bit of physics background. Let's talk about melanin inside chaga and melanin inside the body. So it absorbs thousands of times more electromagnetic radiation actually than chlorophyll does, and chlorophyll is what we need to make proteins and sugars, especially sugars in the body. It exists in many other tissues, as I mentioned. It's actually a very important molecule in any woman who's having a baby, because the fetus has all this melanin in it, as I'll show you. Okay? And it's thought to be, by some people, a master molecule that actually steers how the body communicates. For example, Frank Barr, a scientist, wrote a whole article, a whole issue of a journal called Medical Hypothesis, saying, melanin is such a special molecule and it's found in the babies, it may have a major role in steering things in the body, in the whole regulatory system. Melanin's role in embryological organization, that's in the baby's organization, and tissue repair and tissue regeneration, may be connected to the major role that it plays to balance the body, that's called homeostasis, in the autonomic, neuroendocrine, and immunological system. So in other words, melanin may play a much bigger role than just absorbing all this radiation, and when you get it into your body, it actually has a major effect on your immune system. Here's a picture of a baby at 35 days of pregnancy, and this is the eye of an embryo inside a mother. It's a very tiny little thing. Notice that the eye is pure melanin. That's an amazing picture, isn't it? To see all this melanin is inside, and when the embryo first forms, there is what's called the dark streak. It's all melanin. Okay, here's an example of a plant. It's an eggplant that has melanin in it, and a genetically changed one that is no melanin in it. Notice the size of the two difference. I mean, this is an indirect indication that melanin, directly can transduce energy in the vegetable kingdom. Now, the body is a living matrix, and you really want to get this, because this is kind of part of the operating system of your body. And I know that as we're talking about it, you really have to strain a little bit to stay with me, but I think it'll make some sense here. The body is actually a communication system where everything is connected to everything else, and it works through light. It works through light. It's called biophotons. And in this communication system, cells have connections to other cells called integrins, and electrons and light flows between cells. So it's like a supercomputer. Your body is like a supercomputer, and the skin is connected to every other part of the body. Kind of like a spider web, where everything, when you tug on one part of the spider web, it connects to everything else. And so these cells connect to the connective tissue, which the skin is part of, and it all works like semiconductors. Now, semiconductors, like computer chips, are made out of silicon. These are living semiconductors. Your body is made out of this complex supercomputer that figures everything out. And this is what energy medicine is all about. And when you put chemicals or drugs or lotions or pesticides or mercury from dental fillings that are leaking into your body, then this matrix gets upset. This matrix does not function. The energy doesn't communicate well. And this is where chaga is, I believe, very useful, because it helps you detoxify from all of this. Now here's another form of radiation that's now in our environment. It's called, this is from 1990 to 2007. This is the exponential rise of cell phone use in the United States. This is the increase in 2000 to 2010 of radiation in the environment. This is what we're living in. Here's an example. I just brought one of my little, this is a meter that measures the microwave in this room that you're sitting in. Okay, this is measuring that. You can actually hear, you know, the wireless. I can point it exactly where the most radiation is coming from. These are the communications. That is your Wi-Fi that's in this hotel. This is what people are living in nowadays, you know. In this, we don't know it because you don't feel it, you don't have a sense for it. You need a machine, or in this case, a microwave detector, you know, so you can see it. So I'm mentioning this is because we are changing as a species, and the kids are changing. Have you noticed how the kids are changing in school? They're not learning so well. They're living with their iPads and their iPods and their cordless telephones and everything else, and they're constantly being irradiated. Well, the studies are coming out of Sweden now is showing that after 10 years exposure to cordless phones and cell phones, if you're under a teenager doing that, you have a 5-fold increase in brain tumors. Now, this is not being generally talked about, and I don't want to scare people. I just want to tell you what the studies are beginning to show, and it's highly controversial. But you need to do prevention about this, because everybody's using these communicators, and if you read the fine print on them, it says, don't put closer to 1 inch next to your skin. Look, read your manual. It's in really fine point if you have an iPhone, or, you know, if it's a BlackBerry, it says 1 inch. So, you know, this is microwave radiation, but it's modulated once, as you can hear, and that's what the body isn't happy about. So, because of this radiation, there is about now in cities between 100 to a 20,000-fold increase in background microwave radiation since 1980, because we've put cell phone networks up. Now we're putting up smart meters on people's houses in California. They're all using microwaves, and everybody says, well, they're not affecting anything. But we have shown studies, many scientific studies, that it causes DNA breakages, and the body generally repairs this DNA. But if you have chaga on your skin, I believe, or in your body, it helps repair these DNA breakages more. So just that reason alone, I think, as prevention, it's a useful product to have. Does that make some sense to you? Yes. Yeah. Because you really, you know, this is what we're living in, and we're kind of drowning in this microwave without even knowing it, because we don't see it like light, or we don't hear it like sound. We don't have a sense for it. And these things take a while. So melanin has a high antitoxic potential and helps enzymatic processes. It's a non-specific protective agent. It helps against mutation. It's capable of interacting with other chemicals called xenobiotics that cause oxidation, like heavy metals and other things. The body gets rid of them. It's one of the biggest things. And it has a photo and radioprotective activity. In fact, animals fed chaga, as I'll show you in a minute, live longer when you irradiate them with gamma rays. Those really high-intensity rays that come from atomic bombs and from nuclear reactors. They live a lot longer when they take chaga. They've done studies in animals. Here, 305 days versus the control group died in 186 days. Now, I'm not suggesting any of us get exposed to gamma rays or whatever. Not healthy, you know. But we're living in a world that's a little abnormal. It's not what your grandparents lived in and not even what your parents lived in.